Okay, enough of me yapping. On to the first writer. Eric Bodwell writes poetry, apparently not often, he tells us, but more as he gets older. He's never had any of it published, and he's really looking forward to having that happen. Eric is a high school librarian living in North Aurora with his lovely wife and their cat. Eric, please come on up. There he is.
Hi, I'm going to read some of my poems tonight. The first one is called The Library at Night. They say, write what you know. So it's a poem about a library. So, Library at Night. While surveying the shelves, silent and still at the end of the day, I often wonder about the stories and facts having gone home to their parallel neighborhoods. Stories in frayed spines like row houses lived in too long, down one block to the next, at the dinner table, shouting over the cacophony just to be heard while passing butter biscuits, pierogies stuffed with sauerkraut or meatball and rotini. Later on, the windows open, some asleep after making love, others worrying about the next day's work of exposition and denouement. At midnight, the facts still awake across town in their high-rise apartments, ideas bundled like old newspapers in every corner of their rooms. They sit under desk lamps, heads bent down into almost dawn, carefully ordering the universe with their keyboards, documenting the implications of everything seen and unseen. The next one is, I guess it's sort of a political poem, in a way. It's called, tentatively, I'm calling it America. At 25, I was lost in the tangle of your highways, beguiled by your tender box of ideals. First love unburdened by what came after, intentions and questions stumbling out like children to recess. 20 years later, America, what happened to us? I'm bored with your Intamin's apple pie, your Coke Zero, your Nike slogan billboards. I'm done with the deadbeat dreams you still mumble about at night after too much Pinot Grigio. I'm worn down by the same dead boy war stories you tell at parties, always eager for an audience who will nod and agree when I can't anymore. The tired and the poor you leave discarded like clothes on the bathroom floor. Your bloated malls, shuttered libraries, and museums, you never did take care of yourself. The distrustful demons at the core of you listening to my phone calls, tracking the distractions on your televisions, sneaking glances around street corners, obsessing over what I might do now or tomorrow. I surrender, America. To turkey meatloaf and a recliner on Sunday nights, to working later for a newer dream, to waiting for you to change and always knowing what comes next. If you're, say, under the age of 40, you might appreciate this, or if you grew up in the 80s or 90s, it's a poem called Mixtape. The rules, of course, were relative. The Cure, then Prince and the Revolution, and Minor Threat and Marvin Gaye and Independent Clause, a sentence never understood by our parents. The whir, hiss, pop of my dual cassette boombox, song choices and segues, a complete syntax. The art of saying what I never found in the love poem stumbling out of me at 16, to the girl with dyed blue hair and the carefully ripped Susie shirt, who read Sartre in the shade outside the cafeteria, whose name I never knew. This one is a poem about my mom, who, unfortunately, she died a couple years ago from a somewhat rare form of cancer. It's called A Last Letter, so it's addressed to her. This is what I need to tell you. You carried home with you wherever it was needed, rebuilding lives with beef stews and quick breads. You stitched the distance between all of us together like a well-worn winter coat. You were the neighborhood where all of our hearts lived. But that summer, you were just a voice that traveled alone along the wires, the emptiness subtracting you as the doctors added tests and treatments and no diagnosis. What was I to do when you called, naming the sickness, as you made lists and plans for all of us, preparing for what came after? A sturdy pioneer into nothingness in the spaces between the stars. This is a poem to my wife. It's a love poem. I find as I get older and I'm married longer, I find that The day-to-day is easier and the long-term picture is more complex. So that's kind of what it's about. It's called What I Will Find. I have been writing this poem for years, each syllable the work of weeks or months, the metaphors, similes, and alliteration, the punctuation of our small or wide silences, the cluttered and comfortable rooms of our days, the truths of the other lives we invent from our couch, and the gentle, confounding geography of you are all stacked and put aside until one still, early and restless February morning, you still asleep, I will find all of it in an old shoebox, tossed underneath the stairs among the sweaters and blankets. Maybe then, the poem spread out across the coffee table, I will find the stanzas, the enjambments, the meaning living outside the last line. A couple more. This one is called At Blessed Souls Pentecostal. Something that sort of happened, not quite like this, but it became a poem. Though we only attended Blessed Souls Pentecostal Church once, I was 5 and knew how to wonder at such things. The choir stomped the painted concrete floor, clapped, urged us on to glory in heaven, shouted back at the dark crouching outside the corrugated walls. Everyone swayed like drunks, tongues on fire, spilling the Holy Spirit onto supplicating hands with words they didn't understand. Even my mother, who knew all the stories in heaven, waited in line for redemption from the anointed hands and amens of that black-suited preacher. That night, too, I tried praying with the same holy code, stacking syllables like Legos in whatever order I found them. Having heard nothing by morning, I knew God had never left Blessed Souls Pentecostal Church. This last one is called From the Handbook on Leaving. When I was growing up, I moved around a lot, and I always thought, I'm sure I could probably be an expert and write a handbook about that. So I wrote this poem, if you will, considered an excerpt from such said handbook. Honesty is necessary here to finish the work. The Buddhists tell us attachment is death, or at least unhappiness. Take an inventory. The anger you boxed in cardboard on the closet shelf in case you needed it. A kiss from last year folded in half, creased at the center, faded at the edges, still marks the pages in the novel you were reading that afternoon. The regret you have bottled and placed in the back of the pantry among the paprika and olive oil. In the weeks of summer, tossed in with the Christmas ornaments in the attic. Give the kiss to a friend, forget that you left it in between the cushions on her couch. Untangle the summer from the ornaments and drop it in the snow in the park near your apartment. The anger and the regret should be left out on trash day or in an abandoned field at 2 a.m. If you leave the letting go to finish on its own, you will find it one winter morning in the pocket of your robe as if you had never left. Thanks.